The Chase Down podcast presents A City of Champions, a 7-part series chronicling the Cavs' 2016 NBA championship. With help from fans who cheered against us, reporters who covered it, and the players who watched it, we'll take you game by game through the most improbable 3-1 comeback in championship history. Be sure to subscribe to the Chase Down podcast to relive the greatest series we've seen in our lifetimes.
One dribble, steps back, puts up a three, won't go, rebound tip taken by Spates, final seconds, it's over, it's over! Cleveland is a city of champions once again! The Cavaliers are NBA champions!
The series begins Thursday, April 9th.
Hey, hi, hello, what's cracking, what's poppin', all that, Hardwood Knocks listeners. I am Dan Valley coming at you without my co-host, Andrew D. Bailey. We're rolling on with our Decade Player Ranking Series. Adam Fromell from NBA Math and Bleacher Report is joining me once again. We will be going through the top 10 Cleveland Cavaliers of this past decade in just a moment. But first, our usual housekeeping notes. Please continue rating, reviewing, and subscribing to us on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. You can also find us wherever else you are getting your podcasts, whether that's Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, all those places. We are there. You can listen to us anywhere and everywhere. iTunes is still the best way to let us know that you're out there, that you're listening, and to help the pod in general. Please, 5-star ratings, write a review, especially if you have constructive criticism. And definitely make sure that you're downloading all of our episodes. If you have done all that, please, recommendations. Those are equally appreciated as well. We are also on YouTube. All these podcasts are going on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks. You will find us. Like our videos, subscribe. That is also appreciated. You can follow Hardwood Knocks on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks, the Blue Wire Podcast Network, where you can check out all the great sports content that we're pumping out. I really give a tremendous kudos to all of our podcasts for continuing to provide content during the coronavirus pandemic. They've really done a great job. Follow us at Blue Wire Pods. Last but certainly not least, shout out to our sponsor this week, and as always, betonline.ag. Be sure to use the promo code BlueWire, all one word, to receive your welcome bonus when you make your first deposit. You'll be hearing from them once again in just a moment. Now, let's get to talking about the best Cleveland Cavaliers players of the past decade with Adam Fromell. Adam, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I don't know if you can see past my microphone here, but I'm wearing my LeBron James Cavaliers shirt in honor of this episode.
I cannot see past your mic. What does this LeBron James Cavaliers shirt say? Oh, it's him next to Jordan. I like it.
It is him next to Jordan. Yeah, I forget where I got it from, but it's
so you're
the one
wearing,
with,
you're
no
wearing
faces.
a shirt that has a picture of the GOAT and Michael Jordan on it.
That's correct.
Okay, just making sure.
Starting this one off strong.
So we're doing the Cavaliers Decade Player Rankings, top 10 between Adam, myself, and then the fan voting. We will have our composite ranking, go through that 10-1 as a brief reminder. I hope you check out all the previous pods we've already done. I'm not going to list them all. There are, however, landing pages up at NBA Math. Subscribe to us on iTunes, and also go to YouTube, search Hardwood Knocks. We have a playlist with all of these podcasts on there. But we are on to the Cavaliers, and let's start, Adam. Who did the composite ranking give us at number 10?
The composite ranking at number 10, we had Dion Waiters, who was unanimously in 10th place for our three contributors. You and I both had him at 10. The fans narrowly had him at 10 over a number of notable honorable mentions, including Iman Shumpert, Richard Jefferson, Anton Jameson, and interestingly, Andre Drummond. They were all pretty close to each other, but Waiters did hold down that 10th spot.
Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be an argument for me. I will say that I did everything possible in my mind to keep Dion Waiters off the list because I did
too. I just couldn't do it though. Like he at least did score a lot early in his career, and we're not exactly like working from a wealth of options. I mean, again, like Andre Drummond was almost in 10th place on the fans vote, and he's played like 3 games there.
Yeah, and that's why he ultimately belongs there. He spends basically two seasons and change with them, I believe. And so there's relative to some of the other options, or even some of the people that make this list, he has the there-ness factor over them. And like you said, he could score. It was never too efficiently. He hit 45.1% of his twos with the Cavs, which I'll say there's worse. True shooting under 50, though, that's not great. He'll be remembered for not really being able to work with Kyrie, not really being able to work with with LeBron, but I don't know that you can justify, if you wanted to go with a Richard Jefferson argument because of what he did emotionally for the team during his 2 seasons there, I think we can absolutely listen to it. But when you're factoring in on the court stuff, it's really hard to, I'm not trying to, maybe this is a Dion Waiters bias, but one, he's been awesome posting videos during the league stoppage. So shout out to Dion Waiters for posting videos of him on roller skates going around his apartment. But anyway,
he looks good on them too.
Yeah, he looks pretty fluid on them. Going backwards and stuff too. So just throwing that out there.
I think this is a tough one just because the last decade for the Cavaliers was essentially the 4 straight finals runs. So we're going to have the key contributors from that. But then the rest of it, like there hasn't been a winning record in any of the other 6 seasons. I mean, we have 19 win seasons, we have 21 win seasons. So I think we're largely struggling to find those obvious positives for players in this section of the ranking. So for me, it actually kind of mattered that Waiters, they managed to turn him in a 3-team trade with the Thunder and the Knicks into Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith. And, Smith played a pretty crucial part on some of those finals teams. So, as we're digging for these positives, like that did play into my reasoning for having him at 10th and not going with someone like Richard Jefferson.
I'm totally with it, which is ultimately also why I did not have Richard Jefferson at number 10. Hopefully that doesn't spoil anything. Who rolled in at number 9?
Rolling in at number 9, we have Colin Sexton. Both you and I had him at 9th. The fans actually had him 1 spot higher at number 8. I mean, he hasn't played much. We're midway through his second NBA season, but the leap that he's already taken in this second year, he looks so much better and more confident offensively than he did as a rookie. 20.8 points, 3.1 rebounds, 3.0 assists per game. He's shooting efficiently from 3-point range for the second straight season, which wasn't thought to be a huge strength for him when he was coming out of Alabama. So the development we've already seen, his ability to take on such a large offensive role, it was hard to leave him off despite the fact that he's only played 147 games for this franchise.
I actually want to give props to the fans for putting him 1 spot higher than us because I wasn't brave enough to do it.
I was in the same boat. I couldn't quite pull the trigger on that one.
And his shooting kind of has waxed and waned, but there was a point at the beginning of this year, he starts off hot, then goes a little bit cold, but then he catches fire again. And the fire level of his shooting is closer to his normal than not. He's shooting almost 45% from 3 since January 1st of this season. He's also become a little bit better of a passer. And I think for what he does or what his role should be, that combo guard, that secondary guard, his passing has now reached a level where it's adequate. And so if you're looking at him as a floor general, yes, there are these potential problems. But if you're looking at him as that off guard, as someone who's going to predominantly come off maybe the bench and be a star 6th man, I think he's fine there for what he's already doing. And I also think, look, there are a lot of defensive miscues for all of the Cavaliers as young guards, but he can really put some pressure on the ball when he's defending the ball. Watching him during those sort of high intensity spurts, I don't want to say I'm impressed there, but I do think that as the Cavs are worried about forming a league average defensive backcourt when you're dealing with either Darius Garland there, or maybe it's a Kevin Porter Jr., or if you're trying to put all 3 of them on the court at the same time, I do think that Sexton can be a lot better of an on-ball defender than people have realized or given him credit for thus far. And that, too, did factor into me wanting to put him higher. But it also just factored into me in general, making sure that he was on this list. The sample size doesn't really matter to me as much because I think he's established himself at bottom as this legitimate, high-scoring, efficient shooting guard.
And at the same time, there's been so much turnover within the Cleveland organization over the last 10 years that we're talking about a guy who turned 21 100 days before we recorded this podcast. He's only in his second season, which has been interrupted by this pandemic that has the NBA on hiatus. He's still 10th in minutes played over the last decade for the Cavaliers. So it's not like he's struggling in the there-ness category that has proved so important in these rankings. That definitely surprised me just because, we view him as this up-and-comer who's so new to the scene. But again, there's just been that much turnover.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. Who do we have at number 8?
At number 8, we have Channing Frye. He was number 8 for both of us. He was number 9 for the fans. So just reversed there from Colin Sexton's placement. Frye was definitely towards the end of his career during the 2+ seasons, or I guess really 1+ because he was only there for 1 full season and 2 partial seasons. But he did play on those finals-bound teams. He was clearly an important offensive contributor because of his stretchiness, playing largely center for those teams. Another guy who was more there than anything else, but at least he wasn't an active detriment to the team.
And it's not unfair to say that he saved the 2016 Cavs, just from the stories that we hear about behind the scenes, how he really sort of hammered through the walls that were up, and it sort of seemed like there was this level of separation between everyone in the locker room, and it seems like he really was able to break that down. And I do think that's huge because yes, we have to weigh what happened on the court, and hey, he shot over 40% from three during that first half season in Cleveland, and he did shoot in the minutes that he played during the playoffs under 15 per game, but he shot 56.5% from three on 2.7 attempts per game. So just that consistency from beyond the arc on the front line, then combining with what he did behind the scenes and kind of jettisoning the cliques that were formed in Cleveland's locker room. I think it's absolutely huge, if only because we know what that team went on to do. It wasn't just win the title, but it was a race, that 3-1 deficit against the best regular season team at the time by win total in NBA history. So that's absolutely huge. And I get if you're weighing on court contributions more than anything, I totally get putting him lower than this, like the fans did. And I think there's that clear argument for Colin Sexton above him, but I had zero qualms about putting him at number 8. And if I wasn't so much of a coward, I might have considered bumping him up even further.
He actually did have one really memorable game, too. It was Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals in 2016 against the Atlanta Hawks. The Cavs did go on to sweep that series, but they won 121-108 on the road. And Fry was actually the leading scorer, not just for the Cavs, but for the entire game. He had 27 points and 7 rebounds off the bench, shot 10 of 13, made 7 of his 9 threes. And it was just like this relentless barrage. In the second half alone, he went 4 of 5 from downtown. And ultimately, like, they were going to win that series even if he didn't show up, and they lost that game for some reason. But at least he does have that one, like that one highlight moment. He scored 21. He never scored more than 21 points during the regular season with the Cavs, but 27 in a playoff game on the road. Like that, shouts to him for that.
I will issue a mea culpa on myself. He shot 37.7% during his first half season with the Cavs, and he was 40.9% from three during his lone full season in Cleveland. I did look at when he played before he was traded in 2016, 2017. He wasn't really 2017, 2018, excuse me. He wasn't really shooting that well from three, but I ultimately just didn't care about that. Again, the things he did behind the scenes, and then that anecdotal element that you just dropped, those are just absolutely huge. Attention Hardwood Knocks listeners. With currently no NBA, NHL, or MLB, you might think that there's nothing to bet on. Well, you'd be wrong. Our exclusive partner, BetOnline, still has hundreds of events, games, and props to wager on. From their online casino to poker and blackjack, they're bringing Vegas to you. Missing the NFL? No problem. BetOnline has live daily Madden NFL 20 simulations you can bet on. You can also bet on Survivor, Big Brother, American Idol, stock prices, even the nation's hot dog eating contest. All open 24 hours a day and all online. Use promo code BLUEWIRE to join today and receive your new welcome bonus. That's promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word. BetOnline, your online wagering experts.
So let's go from one role player to another, because at number 7 we have Matthew Dellavedova, who was 7 for both me and the fans and was up at 6th for you. I will be the first to admit that I'm biased against Delly here as an Atlanta Hawks fan. I remember too many of the dirty moments in the playoffs and just generally didn't like how he played, because I felt like, there's always a line there's a line in the realm of playing hard, and I think sometimes players can cross that and move into that dirty spectrum, and he was there for me. So I had to give him the respect that his steadiness and pesky defense demanded, but it was hard for me to do so.
That's fair. The reason I put him so high is I almost respect how he became this defensive myth because of what he did against Stephen Curry at certain points. It didn't matter if Steph was injured or that the defensive performances were wildly overrated. I do think there's one value in having someone that you can throw on Stephen Curry and say that you're not going to send a ton of double teams at him. But you look at Dellavedova's defensive hustle, and that's what really sells it for me. And for a good part of his time in Cleveland, his first stint anyway. He's a consistent presence, standstill shooter from beyond the arc. And so, no, you don't want to trust him to really be a primary playmaker, even really a secondary playmaker, but that you can have him work off the ball on offense, and you know that he's really going to run his ass off on the defensive end, no matter who he's really facing. And again, I do think his legend eventually outstripped his actual performance, but to just have someone that you trust enough to throw at those guys, especially when we've talked about how hard it is to defend point guards in general, how pointless point guard defense can be at certain points. Yes, some of his tactics definitely questionable, but that's I don't want to say I admire that, but that's part of playoff basketball too. And he seemed to embody this bridge between an old school, new school approach during those postseasons, specifically the first two when LeBron comes back. And so that's something that I just really respect. And it also makes you feel like his there-ness factor is higher than it really is, because yes, he was traded back to the Cavs from Milwaukee midway through last year, and he was on course to finish the season there this year. But you really only remember that first go round, which really only included 2 seasons of absolute relevance. And the fact what he did defensively, what his assignments were in the playoffs, his roles in the playoffs, it elevates his there-ness factor from actuality. And I kind of respect that this is the player that has that type of anecdotal reputation.
I think we often forget that he was a legitimately good shooter too. Over 40% during 2 of those first 3 seasons in Cleveland, but for whatever reason, he's completely forgotten how to shoot lately. Only 23.1% since returning to the Cavs for the 2019-20 season, and he hasn't been a really effective shooter during any of his Milwaukee seasons either. But yeah, I mean, that prime year, can we say prime for Matthew Dellavedova? Is that a thing? 2015-16, averaging 4.4 assists, only 1.5 turnovers, being a reliable floor spacing 3-point shooter, being such a defensive pest, getting under the skin of opponents as I've proved here. Those are all valuable. So I get the placement for sure.
I love that in the 2 seasons he played with the LeBron Cavs, he shot a higher percentage from 3 than he did from 2. Definitely a function of his shot
major
selection.
Respect for those guys.
But I have, like you said, I have major respect for those guys.
Yep.
So who checked in the composite ranking at number 6?
At number 6, we have Anderson Varejao, who both the fans and myself had at number 6, but you had down at number 7. I know that you have a hot take here that you want to share.
I think that maybe there's some recency bias here, given the direction that the game has gone, and perhaps this is throwing cold water all over what you thought was a scorching hot take. I feel like he might be one of the most overrated players in NBA history. I know he has the all-defensive team 2010 to his name. That was actually not a part of this since it fell in 2009, 2010. An incredible hustle player that I just feel like never really added a huge amount to even a semi-significant amount of value. Like, yes, he could really hit the glass, and if you're going to give him open looks on the offensive end inside the arc, like he's going to hit them, but what else did he have to his game? Like, he would have to take so many of his shots really inside of 8 feet restricted area, basically. Not someone who was ever really able to create his own shot. Maybe there was a point in his career where he was just a really good passer statistically, and so we always had that, I guess, IQ part of his game, but it just feels like he is, I don't even know what it is. Because he spent so much time in Cleveland, I don't know what about him fans actually love aside from the hustle. And to me, that just...
The hairstyle too.
He had great hair, I will say that. And then look, 2012, 2013 averages over 14 points a game in only 25 appearances. The injuries also are something that I struggled with. You have that like a 3-season block where he failed to appear in even 35 games a year. And, that's not, I don't know that contributes to him being overrated, but I'm really just, the way he played, I just never really saw him add significant value to really good teams. And maybe that's underrating what he did during the early LeBron years. I'm fully aware.
I think that's why I struggled so much with him, because he was the toughest for me to place for sure. And it was because of the injuries. It was because his best seasons came for really bad Cavs teams, and he never contributed in the playoffs for the Cavaliers. His last playoff appearance with Cleveland was in the 2009-2010 season, which is not part of our purview here. So that definitely matters. But I think at least anecdotally, he's part of one of my favorite stories from this Cavs era. And maybe I'm misremembering here, but so correct me if I'm wrong. But during the 2015-16 season, the Cavs traded him to the Portland Trailblazers, who immediately waived him, and he ended up signing with the Golden State Warriors, which meant that he'd spent enough time in Cleveland, but was on the Golden State roster. So no matter who won the 2016 finals, he was going to get a ring. And I think that for whatever reason, I remember that because it was such a unique situation. So kudos to him for that, I guess.
Did he actually get a ring? Wasn't there something going around that he didn't get a ring?
I don't think that was the case. I feel like he got one.
He got a Warriors title ring in 2017.
I don't think it's going to show up on like his official page or anything, but I feel like he still got the hardware just because he spent so much time with them during the regular season. But again, like I might be totally misremembering this.
He apparently won't accept NBA championship. This is a headline like if the Cavs offer it. I don't know if this is now just outdated, but the Warriors offered him a 2017 championship ring.
Yes, okay. I am correct that he was guaranteed it. He was the first player per Elias Sports Bureau to play for both finals teams in the same season. So he was going to get one if he'd accepted it.
That is correct. Okay. That's a great anecdote, but couldn't you
totally
argue for this specific podcast when we're talking about ranking Cavaliers that him being traded away from the Cavs and then immediately going to sign with the Warriors once he had the chance is kind of just like, or is it not immoral in any way because the Cavaliers were the team that traded him and that sort of gave him carte blanche to go wherever he wanted to go?
I think that, but then also just the fact that you're bringing this up after defending Dellavedova makes me even more confident in this opinion.
All right, fair enough. Who do we have at number 5?
Yeah, so at number 5, I think, is where we start like the much more obvious section of these rankings. It's J.R. Smith. He was 5th place for me, for you, for the fans. He got almost half of the 5th place votes, like being exactly 5th place on these top 10 ballots. No one else appeared on more than 3 ballots in the 5th place spot. So like he was the very obvious choice here. And I think for good reason. Like he's clearly a cut below the top 4 guys that we'll get to. But at the same time, like he's the first guy where it's like, yeah, like he very obviously added value in Cleveland for a while.
Yeah, especially when he was traded, came over in that trade from the Knicks. He shot 40% from 3 on 6.6 attempts during his time with the Cavs for that season. So that's absolutely huge. He wasn't, he had some like pretty big defensive moments for them in the playoffs too. And even throughout that playoff run, the 2016 playoff run, he shot 43% from 3. And LeBron had to shout him out at the championship parade because they basically got J.R. Smith for nothing. And so he was trolling the Knicks for not viewing J.R. Smith as even close to an asset. And everyone's going to remember him for maybe his exit from the Cavs where he wasn't really around the team, or they're going to remember in the 2018 finals, we got one of the greatest NBA memes of all time because J.R.
Or throwing soup at Damon Jones.
Throwing soup at Damon. Look, as far as I'm concerned, the soup incident has to boost him up a peg or two.
Undoubtedly a positive.
Who throws soup?
I mean, that was one of the most fun days of Twitter that I can remember. Just like the speculation of why, of who he threw it at, of whether it scalded them. What kind of soup was it? Like, what kind of soup would J.R. Smith enjoy during a practice?
Yeah, there were like sources behind this too. It was like sources confirmed that J.R. Smith threw soup. That's just absolutely fantastic. But look, if you look at his Cavaliers tenure in the aggregate, he, for the most part, provided dependable three-point shooting, with someone who could at least move defensively for a lot of his time there. And to have that spacing around LeBron is, I think, paramount and a big part of why they were so successful just running through Eastern Conference opponents during most of LeBron's tenure. And look, if you want to ding him for what happened in 2018, that's fine. I still think that if the Cavs win Game 1, first of all, we don't know if they would have still won Game 1 had that gap never happened. There's also the George Hill missed free throws that we have to talk about there. Even if they do, though, they're not winning that series. And so I just don't know how much you ding him for that. I know that LeBron was superhuman during that game, because when is really LeBron not superhuman in the playoffs?
One of his best games, yeah.
So I get that point of it, but how do you put him outside of the top five? Who are you bumping up into this?
I do think you're selling his defense a little short, too. I think he was more than just palatable during his first couple of seasons in Cleveland. Like when he was fully engaged and accepting of that role where he wasn't going to have as many offensive touches, like he seemed to be a legitimate positive on the perimeter. Switchable. He was able to stay between his man and the basket at all times. Like he wasn't a great defender, maybe not even like a really good defender, but I think he was like significantly above average.
I don't remember him fondly during his final two like postseason runs with the Cavs, but look, in 2015, in the 2016 postseason, he played and defended a lot of three, and that's not something that I feel like he really did in the other two postseasons, 2017, 2018, and so 2016, I'm fully on board with you. Maybe I'd have to go back and watch more of the 2017, 2018 playoffs, but that's probably a good talking point for his career in general, where I don't think he was ever, people just assumed he was a bad defender because he was J.R. Smith, but he was rarely ever the worst defender on the court. And there was probably something about playing with LeBron that maybe kept his consistency in line a little bit, perhaps, but that's something that I think you can go back and look at throughout his career, that he was probably unfairly impugned on the defensive end, more so than he should have been. Never a great defender, but I don't think he was ever these, people treated him like he was Trae Young basically at points in his career.
Right.
Number 4.
Yeah, speaking of guys who are not quite sure how to value their defense, we have Tristan Thompson, who was 4th for me. He was 4th for the fans. He was up at 3rd for you. I'm going to guess that theirness played a part in that, just because he's spent his entire career, which started in this decade with the Cavaliers. He's played over 4,000 more minutes than anybody else in a Cavaliers jersey over the last decade. He's played more than 220 games, or more than 230 games more than anybody else in Cleveland over this last decade. Like that definitely matters. And he's been very effective, especially on the offensive glass throughout that time.
It's everything you just said, and it's me weighting the theirness. But there's also, looking at this season in particular, they're just seeing maybe adding little layers to his game where it's like, oh, does Tristan Thompson kind of have a floater now? And Tristan Thompson is still playing like he gives a damn on defense. And look at how Tristan Thompson is playing when the Cavaliers post-Drummond trade are running out these 3 big lineups. And so I respect that he has had some good moments in the post-LeBron era as well. And that, I think, drums him up just as much as the defense we saw from him during the peak of the Cavaliers in the postseason. And he's always been just as a big, more switchable than I guess people do give him credit for it, but I don't think that it's just he's associated with it as much. And he is just one of the more mobile fives that you could trust. And he's not especially big for his position. So the fact that you could put him on a lot of these other centers and trust him on the offensive glass is actually kind of a big deal. And so I was a little bit surprised that Kevin Love, I know he's the better player, but I really thought that Tristan Thompson's sort of theirness, coupled with everything he actually did on the court, would have gotten him in the top 3.
So we've been kind of focusing on some anecdotes with this Cavaliers edition, and here's another fun one. I think that when you look at a Basketball Reference player page, you see the player's nicknames, the player's position, which hand they shoot with. And that's one of the most fun entries on the entire site, is that they actually have shoots left-handed, crossed out, and then right-handed, because midway through his career, he decided to switch. And it actually worked. Like, as you said, he's developed a little bit of a floater game. He's been even more efficient around the rim. I believe he's improved or at least stagnated as a free throw shooter despite switching hands. And that's just a really cool thing that you don't see a lot. But I also wanted to ask you, if we go back to the Charlotte Hornets podcast, I asked you if you thought Marvin Williams had justified being the number 2 pick because of what he did post-Hawks career. So Tristan Thompson was the number 4 pick in the 2011 NBA draft. He's never averaged more than 12 points per game. He's never really been a star, but has he justified that draft position just based on the consistency and length of his tenure in Cleveland?
I honestly don't know. If you look at maybe it's tough because we know some of the players that were taken after him in that draft. Kemba, Klay Thompson was in that draft. I don't think you call him a draft bust. That's where I landed with Marvin Williams. I think you'd still rather have many of the other players that came after him. Would you rather have had, yeah, or maybe not? Because I mean, you get to a point where it's, would you rather have had Marcus Morris or Tristan Thompson for their career? And I think Tristan Thompson is the answer. Would you rather have had Tobias Harris or Tristan Thompson? I think there's a debate there, and so he's definitely not a draft bust. It's tough when you know. In hindsight, it's just tough when you know how many of the players came after him. You're like, well, he probably should have gone maybe 10th or a little bit lower in that draft, just looking at some of the names.
Yeah, I think regardless of where he should have gone, I do think he's done enough to justify it. Spending 9 seasons and counting with the same organization and being pretty solid throughout it. Like, in some ways, it's disappointing that he hasn't really grown more than he has since he entered the NBA. But at the same time, like he entered with a very, very established skill set, that presence on the offensive glass that just demanded extra bodies. So even if he hasn't developed into a floor spacing power forward or center, even if he's never really shown much ability as a facilitator, he's above 2 assists each of the last 2 seasons, but those have come with an increase in turnovers. And it's not like you're really going to count on him as a primary, secondary, or even tertiary distributor. But at the same time, like just the switchability on defense, the offensive rebounding, the ability to stay healthy and play game after game until these last couple of years. All of that, I think, if you told me that's what I was getting with the number 4 pick, you're limiting your ceiling, but I think I'm okay with that floor.
No, for sure. I think I would still, with the player I'm going to pit against him right now, I think I'd still go with the other player, but there might be a debate. Would you rather have Tristan Thompson's career or Nikola Vucevic's career? Where Vuce is clearly the better individual player, but look at the level of winning that Thompson has contributed to when the Cavaliers were actually really good.
Right, and that's the other thing, just being an integral part of a team that went to 4 straight finals and won a title. That's a big deal too, especially when those were probably the seasons where if he was going to take some sort of offensive leap, it was going to be then. But those are the 4 seasons where he averaged single-digit points sandwiched around these double-digit seasons, which is a pretty clear indication to me that he was not only able to take a back seat, but he was able to do so willingly, without complaining, and without it letting affect the rest of his game. And that's important too.
Who do we have at number 3? No surprises here, obviously.
Yeah, no surprises. It's Kevin Love. He was 3rd for both me and the fans. He was down at 4 behind Tristan Thompson for you. He hasn't spent as much time there. He was the clear 3rd wheel on those finals bound teams. But at the same time, like, it's Kevin Love. He's an incredible player, unquestionably an all-star caliber player. He has one of the most memorable moments in Cavaliers history, not just this decade, when he totally locked down Steph Curry at the end of a finals series to seal the championship. And I think that was a good indication of how he was such a defensive minus during his time in Minnesota that I think we forgot that this guy actually does have quick feet. He actually can defend on the perimeter, and Cleveland often let him do so. They were more willing to let him switch onto guards than we'd seen in his previous stop. But I don't think there's any argument for him being in the top 2, but I totally get why he's 3rd.
Yeah, the defensive stuff is tough. You have to really slog down the pace for him to be viewed as any sort of switchable. And so,
right, and I'm not saying he should consistently do that. Just that they were okay with him doing it sometimes.
Right. Look, he's been, first of all, it sort of catches you off guard that he's been in Cleveland for 6 years now, doesn't it? A little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that he's fourth in minutes played and 3rd in games played during this decade.
And look, he's been good for the time that he's been with the Cavs, averaging 17 points, 10 rebounds, 2.3 assists, shooting 37.5% from 3. He's seen his 2-point percentage drop, but he hasn't been as much as a post fixture. At least he definitely wasn't during many of those LeBron James years. Solid. I don't have an argument against him being at number 3. Tristan Thompson's there, and this inevitably means more to me. But like I said, he had one of the biggest defensive sets in NBA history, really, defensive stops, and certainly the biggest defensive stop of his career. Are you soured on where he would be in these rankings at all by the circumstances under which it seems like he might eventually leave Cleveland, where it seems like he's just been so wildly, openly unhappy there, even though he's sort of come out and said something different, where it's like, owning up to that behavior at points, or does that not really matter to you at all?
It did matter. I wanted to make an argument if I can reveal that number 2 is obviously Kyrie Irving, who was unanimously number 2 among the 3 contributions. I did consider pushing Love above Kyrie just because Kyrie's departure from Cleveland was so ugly. And then I was like, hey, wait, like this season especially, we've seen just how much of a malcontent Love has been, how it's obviously affected his play and to some extent, at least, because his team was never going anywhere, the team's play. And that his eventual exit probably is going to be similarly ugly. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. So I couldn't bump him up because they both kind of fit into that world.
Yeah, that's also fair. I think you also have to credit, even though it was rocky at first, and there were all those rumors when he was entering free agency in the summer of 2015, the fact that he was like Chris Bosh, he's able to go from being just the focal point of an entire offense to now he's all of a sudden the third wheel and more of a complementary piece. And again, it wasn't always smooth, and perhaps it doesn't end as smoothly his time with LeBron as it did if they don't win that title. But look at what happened with Kyrie, where I know he was a little bit younger, but he didn't want to be even the number 2 on this team.
Yep.
And so you have to credit Kevin Love, even given the onset problems, for making that transition from this really megastar fixture in Minnesota. 2013, 2014, Kevin Love was just an absolute monster. He was a monster for basically the 3 previous seasons as well. But you have to credit him for making the adjustments that he inevitably needed to when you're looking at his volume, his role, the type of shots that he's getting, and then the staying power that he's still allowed to have, even in sort of that reduced capacity. And so there's not even a question to me that he belongs in the top 4. It's just, like I said before, I weight Tristan Thompson's there-ness a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Yeah, like I said, I briefly toyed with moving Love up to second place over Kyrie Irving, which 2 people actually did on their ballots, and I kind of get it. But at the same time, like with Irving, he's still second in games played. He's still second in minutes played over the last decade. And even if the exit was ugly, he didn't bring back much of a package. Again, it was centered on Isaiah Thomas, which just didn't work out because of the hip injury. Yeah. I mean, he's still Irving was still an incredible offensive force throughout his time in Cleveland. He has inarguably, not even arguably, the biggest shot in franchise history with his Game 7 dagger over Steph Curry to win that 2016 Finals. He has the anecdotes, he has the stats, he has the longevity, he has the force of personality, for better or for worse. And I don't think we're going to forget Kyrie's tenure in Cleveland anytime soon.
Look, he hit one of the 5 biggest shots in NBA history. That alone just might be enough to put him wherever you want on this list below LeBron James, even if he wasn't the consensus number 2.
Whoa, spoilers there. I thought I was supposed to reveal the rankings.
Sorry, I apologize. Everyone who thought that maybe Alonzo G was going to finally get his due, we apologize. I don't really have anything to just add there. It was interesting that he never really, and part of this I think has to do with Cleveland's turnover during his time there, but he never really became the player that he is now, more independent, where we saw in Boston that he can be as my phone goes off on my computer. I'm still working out the settings on my new laptop, and I forgot to change that iMessage. So if anyone wants to
humble brag there.
It's not a humble brag. I was mourning the loss of my old one, actually. There's nothing like spending unplanned money on a new laptop during a global pandemic. There's nothing like that feeling. Anyway, he gets to Boston. I think that first season there was really the first time ever he was a consensus top 10 player, but it also showed, and even this season in Brooklyn before he got injured, and even in his second season in Boston, regardless of how choppy that one was, that he could be the anchor of just this good offense and a net plus overall for his team in a huge way by himself. And he never really got to that point in Cleveland. It was probably too early. They didn't have the talent around him before LeBron got there. But I did always what gave me pause is how bad the Cavs routinely were when he would play without LeBron during those LeBron years. It felt like a player of his caliber should have been able to navigate those minutes better. That did not. Again, he was the clear number 2 for me, but that's always something I kind of sort of lamented. And maybe it was a supporting cast issue with who he's playing those minutes with. But I do wonder if maybe the tenure there is at all a little bit different, if those minutes are better, or if it was more clear that LeBron viewed him as the person to which he was going to pass the torch. Or maybe Kyrie just saw the writing on the wall. As much as he disliked playing with LeBron, maybe he also just knew that LeBron was going to leave and absolutely gut the franchise in the process, and he didn't want to be a part of that starting over journey.
I think it could be a combination of all of the above, honestly. But my Kyrie take here, and tell me if it's tepid, if it's hot, if it's just warm, is that he's been such an interesting figure for 5 years now. Let's say between the personality, the flat earthing, the conspiracy theories, the asking out, and the weird Boston tenure, that in some ways, like, he's kind of become uninteresting to me.
I don't find him uninteresting. I do feel like maybe we've crossed the point where is he being unfairly covered, where it does seem like we get these, this has nothing to do with his Cavs tenure, I guess, but we get these super personal anecdotes, and in the age of what's supposed
coverage of him has been strange for sure.
In the age of what is supposed to be high-end mental health awareness, it's weird that we're so quick to write him off as an asshole. Even though, look, jokes are going to be made. I've made the jokes, but there seem to be that, people who cover him from afar. I'm not talking about the reporters who are around him every day, but there are people who are just watch him or cover him from afar who just assume that he's kind of a jackass and a team cancer. And I feel like that's unfair. And that's why I sort of find him interesting. It's how quick we're willing to just ignore maybe what could actually, when he comes out and says that he was dealing with the death of his grandfather, how quick we are to not accept that at face value. I'm not trying to defend what he did. He's certainly a polarizing figure, and that's why I actually find him more interesting since he left the Cavs than during his Cleveland days.
And he's also been the source of some unsubstantiated rumors that are definitely unfair to him. So I think that, I guess, like, I don't know, I tend to gravitate away from the Kyrie Irving stories these days just because I don't particularly like how the coverage has been centered around him sometimes.
I think that's absolutely spot on and fair. Who's our number one? Who's our mysterious number one?
Yeah, he only spent 4 seasons in a Cleveland uniform on his second tenure, and it's LeBron James. He was good at basketball, and I'm not sure how much I have to add beyond that, because it's like, come on, like, obviously he's number one.
Yeah, let's move on to the honorable mentions as far as I'm concerned.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind doing that, because I don't think talking about LeBron James's tenure in Cleveland is particularly interesting here.
Justin, I will say the 2 things I'll note, or one is a question, but the 2 things I'll note, just an absolute beast in the playoffs. Like, that's where I feel like the LeBron switch was sort of born, where, maybe he had a little bit in Miami, but I also think he was probably his best defensive self regular season wise when he was in Miami. And so he gets to Cleveland where there's just this switch where you could tell that he's really conserving himself during the regular season. Then he just goes off in the playoffs. I mean, not the most efficient finals in 2015, but not having Kevin Love or Kyrie Irving. There are moments like that I respect just as much as I respect the block, the title itself. My second point would be, what is the case for not having him number one on your ballot? It would strictly be player X if it's Kyrie played more seasons there, and I just don't think that that's a legitimate take.
Yeah, this sounds like a good spot for some awkward silence in response to that question. I have no answers for that. Now, to follow up your first point, though, the rolling player ratings that we have on NBA Math, he's got one of my absolute favorite career trajectories on that, because it's always so high in the regular season, but without fail, his line moves up as soon as the playoffs start, each and every year. And that's not something we see. Like, even from the biggest superstars throughout NBA history, they'll have a couple of playoff runs where they really elevate their game, but not every single year without fail. But, his finals record. So.
Oh, man. Can we move on to the honorable mentions, please?
Yeah, so at 11th in the fan vote, we had Iman Shumpert, who was very, very close behind Dion Waiters. At 12th place, we had Richard Jefferson, also very close. 13th, Anton Jameson. 14th, inexplicably, Andre Drummond, who has, again, played like all of 3 games in a Cleveland uniform. 15th, we had Kyle Korver. 16th, we had Larry Nance Jr., who I was surprised that he wasn't higher up, he was really close to getting the 10th spot over Dion Waiters for me. And I think he's just filled such a valuable role, not necessarily for good teams, but throughout his time in Cleveland, just the efficiency and the two-way contributions.
Yeah, I'm certainly with you there. I would expect him to be a little bit higher. I wonder, and he's one of those players where you can envision if the Cavs kind of put him in a little bit better of a position that you could see him being like even better than he actually is. So yeah, I guess I didn't toy enough with putting him above Dion Waiters. I would think that there's a case though to get him into the top 10. So it's weird that he finished, what was this, 16th?
16th, yeah. 17th, we had Mo Williams. 18th, Jordan Clarkson. 19th, Timofey Mozgov. 20th, we had a tie between James Jones, Baron Davis, and Daniel Gibson. And then the really fun one is 23rd. Whoever gave Zydrunas Ilgauskas a 5th place vote, like, we're talking about this decade only. Ilgauskas retired in 2011 after playing with the Miami Heat, so he played 0 games for Cleveland. I'm not quite sure what the case is to have him here.
In fairness,
you do you.
In fairness, whoever voted for him, I did talked about Gerald Wallace making the 2010 All-Defensive Team as part of putting him on the Hornets All-Decade Team. Now, I think I put him 10th or 9th as opposed to 5th, and he actually did play for Charlotte during the decade, but just to play devil's advocate here.
Sorry, I did misspeak, and it was 6th, but that's actually not that much better. So anyway, 24th, we have Jetty Osman. In a tie for 25th, we have Darius Garland, Dwayne Wade, and George Hill, who have all had pretty similar careers. Tied for 28th, we have Ramon Sessions and Carlos Boozer. And tied for 30th with 1 10th place vote apiece, we have Luke Walton, Luol Deng, Luke Herringody, and Derrick Rose.
Oh me, oh my. Well, how did Darius Garland got a vote, but Kevin Porter Jr. did not?
Luke Herringody got a vote, and Kevin Porter Jr. did not.
Unacceptable. Kevin Porter Jr. is legit.
I want to know, like, I wish maybe I should include like a spot on the ballot for I'm being serious versus I'm just totally trolling.
Well, then you're going to encourage trolls even more. We need to put names to this shit.
Yeah, maybe it shouldn't be anonymous anymore. I guess like Herringody did play 42 minutes or 42 games in Cleveland, but he also shot 37.6% from the field, 24.1% from 3-point range. So, it wasn't great.
Maybe this is just a flex of they know who he is.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a name that I have not thought about in quite some time. I wonder where Luke Herringody is now.
That's a separate pod, I think. We could go at least 60 to 75 minutes on that.
He is playing for, oh man, I don't know how to pronounce this. He's playing in Spain. I know how to pronounce that.
Well, that's
Joventut?
Sure. All right. We'll take your word for it there. I did not Google that. That's the update you came here for. We're sorry we made you wait 45 minutes for it, but the reason you listened to the pod is now complete. Adam, thanks again. This was so much fun. We have I believe the Dallas Mavericks are up next.
That's correct. I need to set up the poll for that one.
So please fill out your ballots. Those will be out on NBA Math's Twitter account at NBA_Math. Follow them. Until next time, Adam and I leave you with the shout out to the apparently underrated, underappreciated Kevin Porter Jr.